I've often thought about writing a little book on justification because it's been such a hot topic over the years, but I've always had other things to do which seemed more pressing. But then when John Piper's book came out, various friends said, you maybe need to respond to this because people are picking it up and saying, there you are, he has disproved what N.T. Wright says about justification. So eventually I thought, I would rather wait and do this as part of a larger project, but actually since it is such a buzz at the moment, I think it better be dealt with sharply and parked as much as I can before I get the chance to do the fuller treatment which still awaits. Part of the difficulty we face with the word justification is that from quite early on in church history, different theologians used this word, justification, or its Latin or Greek equivalents, dikaiosis or justificatio, to mean things that are significantly different from what Paul means by it. Because what's happened is, perhaps even since Augustine, but certainly in the 20th century with theologians like Karl Barth and Hans Kuhn, the word justification is used to cover the entire process of salvation, from the first workings of God's grace right through everything else that has to happen, conversion, sanctification, right through to final glorification. Rather like somebody who, discovering how important the steering wheel is in a car, uses the phrase steering wheel to refer to the whole car. I'm going to take my wheel and drive down the road. And you can imagine somebody doing that, but it's a bit misleading because this thing has a very, very precise function. And there is more to the car than that. But saying that there's more to the car than that doesn't devalue the place of the steering wheel. It merely puts it in its proper context. Equally, there are some people who have shaped the doctrine of justification as an answer to questions which were not exactly Paul's questions, but were particularly the late medieval questions. Because in the late Middle Ages, people had this idea that there was this thing called righteousness which you needed to acquire, and that it was basically a sort of moral quality or virtue. And so if you didn't have enough of your own, how could you get some from somewhere else? And much of the Reformation and post-Reformation formulations of the doctrine were answering that question about how can I get enough righteousness so that when God looks at me, he'll see that I am righteous. And in a sense, what, say, the Westminster Confession does is to give the right answer to the wrong question. Because the question Paul is asking is not, how can you get enough righteousness so that when God looks at you, he'll be happy with you? But how can you be sure that you are a member of God's people, that your sins are forgiven, and that therefore you are part of the covenant purposes of God, which ever since Abraham have been the way in which God was addressing and rescuing the world. I would hope that anyone reading my book on justification will come away with a sense of excitement at the big vision which Paul sets before us, because it's not just a vision about me and how I get to heaven, or even, which would be better, me and how I get to be one of those who share in the new heavens and new earth. It's about God himself and about a big picture of God and God's purposes for the whole world. And the point of justification is not that the spotlight is on me all the time. The point about justification is the spotlight is on what God is doing through the gospel for the whole creation.